The phrase literally means, if 1,000 people point their fingers at someone, that person will die even without illness. Its figurative meaning is that overwhelming public condemnation, slander, or collective hostility can ruin a person, even if they are innocent or healthy. It reflects how the pressure of mass criticism, rumors, or collective anger can be destructive, causing emotional collapse, loss of reputation, or downfall, even without physical harm. It is often cited as a warning about the power of public opinion and the danger of becoming the target of collective blame or resentment. 1,000 fingers. He stopped answering his phone on purpose the week the rumors began. The buzzing, an ordinary thing that had once threaded the day together, work calls, a dentist reminder, his sister's check-ins, turned into a chorus he could not bear. At first, he told himself silence was a kind of dignity. If he did not participate, the story might exhaust itself. That belief lasted until the second morning, when the front door neighbor, someone he had brought soup to the winter before when her heating failed, crossed the sidewalk without meeting his eyes. The neighbor's lips moved in a quick, ritual whisper with another passerby, and the air between them felt like a sealed room. He had never been a public man. His life followed modest equations: second-floor apartment, the same seat at the cafe that served 2 sweet pastries, a mid-level job in an architectural firm that trusted him because he trusted deadlines. The accusation that leaked into the small online forums and then into the group chat for their building was thin as smoke, an embellished incident at a party, a private joke reported as intent, an overheard sentence warped into evidence. Each retelling added a hand to the story until the original shape could not be recognized. People do not need to know facts to act as if they do. At the office, there was a meeting that lasted 37 minutes. Human resources used the language of procedure, of neutral concern, but the subtext was visible like a stain spreading across the carpet, an invitation to distance oneself. His manager stopped assigning projects with his name attached. The junior architect who had once asked for his counsel avoided the elevator. A coffee cup sat untouched on his desk for 2 days until someone finally cleared it away, as if removing a marker. The first week was about logistics, emails redirected, invitations unaccepted, a polite but growing practical exclusion. Things broke down because other people treated them as broken. He learned, in small humiliations, how reputation functions, a shared ledger written by others' impressions, and once the ledger says you owe, people stop lending you the benefit of time. He felt his small world narrow into a room whose walls were made of gossip. There were nights when he walked until his feet ached, past the closed restaurants and late-night cleaners, to count the sounds that were not his. He tried to explain the accident of language, the context lost in shorthand during a game of retelling. He wrote long, careful emails to friends, to colleagues. He printed versions to leave on the notice board at work. Few replied. One response, 6 paragraphs of deflection and a note about discretion, taught him the most painful lesson. For many, social risk is heavier than loyalty. Being with someone accused is, they thought, an invitation to be accused as well. The second month softened nothing. The firm placed him on leave pending an internal review. The leave was unpaid. His landlord knocked on the door with a form and the requisite evasive look. The building's group chat replaced his name with an old anecdote that was not about him, but eased them into laughter. He slept in fits and woke with the taste of copper. The small ways the world protected itself from scandal looked like self-preservation to some and cowardice to him. He considered fighting back at first with fire, a list of facts, timestamps, the names of those present. He drafted a thread designed to dismantle the rumor with the same speed and publicness that had carried it. Then he paused. He remembered the night at a bar years ago when a hangover of words had left 2 strangers in tears, how quickly tongues manufactured cruelty. He thought of his sister's voice. You are not the sum of other people's shorthand. The truth, he knew, would not fit neatly into a revenge post. Even if he cleared his name publicly, the pattern would remain. The town's appetite for narrative would find another mouthful. So instead, he stepped sideways. He rented a small workspace by the river that smelled faintly of old paint and fish. It was not a declaration, more a necessary rearrangement. There, in a warehouse lit by a single, flaking skylight, he began to redraw the projects he had been quietly building in his head for years: modular shelters for people who needed cheap, durable living. Small community gardens that could repurpose abandoned parking lots. The work was less about proof and more about practice. He saw it as an exercise in existence. If reputation could be torn away by rumor, he would build something that could be judged by its use rather than its backstory. People came by. Not many at first: a neighbor curious about the scaffolding, a volunteer from a food pantry who had once tutored teens in basic CD. But slowly the group grew into a pragmatic assembly of strangers who wanted shelters and planters and places to gather. CAD. They worked without interest in his past and judged him by what he did in the sunlight. When a teenage boy asked him why he had stopped teaching at the community workshop, he told a partial truth: "I had to go away to start again." The boy didn't press for details. No one treated him like a problem to be sanitized. There were days when the absence of his old life felt like grief, and he allowed himself to move through grief the way you move through rain, with an umbrella that does not stop the wet but keeps you functioning. He read books that asked more questions than they answered, sat through long bouts of silence on park benches, and started answering a different set of emails: contractors, suppliers, a neighbor who knew a man with a truck. The story that had once smothered him was, in the machinery of rebuilding, reduced to background noise. It still existed, but its edges were blurred by the more tangible work of assembling wood and concrete. A year later, the shelter project opened, a narrow building with efficient storage and a warm common room, built in the converted footprint of a derelict office. It was not a monument to vindication. He never wanted monuments. People moved in who needed a roof and a neighbor. Volunteers returned every Saturday to tend the planters outside. The man who had once sat in the firm's muted corner sent a message of congratulations. It was brief and careful. He did not respond at first. Then, in a later note, he wrote only, "It serves people well." That is enough. He discovered, in the slow work of making things that worked, that there are two types of public pressure. One is immediate and performative, a wave that demands images and resolutions and someone to blame. The other is patient and useful, the scrutiny of people who come with tools and stay to learn. The first can topple a life like wind topples a tree. The second shapes foundations that stand. The lesson was not grandiose. He did not throw a speech at a crowd or reclaim his former social calendar. He learned how to attend to the small ledger he could control, the promises he made, the calls he returned, the architecture of a room that sheltered someone. He recognized that dignity can be rebuilt, not in the moment of vindication, but in the moments when you show up repeatedly and do the work that needs doing. There were moments of temptation later, when he imagined the old gossiper seeing what he had done and being struck with shame. Those moments passed because shame is a private thing and rarely performs an apology on cue. What remained instead were quiet, ordinary affirmations: a neighbor bringing soup because he had once brought her soup, a former colleague attending the opening because she had a free Saturday and it felt like the right thing to do. These soft returns were not about rescuing a name. They were about finding a community that judged by participation rather than rumor. Years later, when a young architect asked him over coffee how to weather public opinion, he gave a practical answer: do good work, keep your promises, and build things others can live in. The young architect pressed for something more philosophical. He smiled and said, "People will point. It's human to point. The work is to decide whether you let their pointing become your house." He kept the skylight in the warehouse. Sometimes, on winter mornings, light would fall across the plans spread on the table, and he would trace the measurements with his fingers as if reading Braille. He had been pointed at. He had been small for a while. He would not say the experience had not left a mark; it had, and those marks informed how he listened and how he spoke afterward. But he had learned that being devastated by others' gaze is optional. One can be seen widely and crumble, or be seen and build, slowly, a life that answers to usefulness rather than rumor.